Hi, I'm Bruce Whipple, and today I want to talk about how to avoid the business graveyard. And to do that, let's go on a little history lesson here. You see a guy in a buggy, and a buggy, the driver of the buggy used a buggy whip to move the horses along if they needed to do that. And so let me start there, but we're going to go through a couple other examples here. So, buggy whip was eventually replaced by the car. And so nobody needed buggy whips. And there was a company called Chicago Rawhide that could have either made all those buggy whips essentially, could have either gone out of business or say, how do we evolve from that? And what they did was they ended up making seals out of that leather and sold them. It became a large company. So they moved with the times. But as you see the buzzards looking over this scenario, you see two graveyards. One of those is Blockbuster, the other one is Kodak. So let's talk about what happened to those companies. So Blockbuster, and a lot of this you're not even going to know because you're too young, but Blockbuster used to have thousands of stores which rented VHS video tapes. Nobody even uses those anymore, pretty much. And so you would go in and you'd rent and you'd return them, and that was their business model. And eventually, as you all know now, that process changed and nobody got VHSs, and Betamaxes was the other version of it, to a lesser degree. And so they went essentially out of business. I think there's one privately owned in like Bend, Oregon now, but that company went out of business. Now, what did they do along the way? They had an offer from Netflix to join and have a co-venture where they did streaming. They didn't do it. Netflix, in the beginning, used to mail DVDs to people when it went from VHS to DVDs. They tested it, it worked, and they would mail them. Look at Netflix today. They have moved to streaming. They've moved to their own content, and they've survived and done very, very well. If you look at Blockbuster, essentially gone, okay? Kodak's another interesting one. Do you know who invented the first digital camera? It was Kodak. But Kodak decided we're not going to market that because it's going to cannibalize our film industry. So we're not going to do anything with it. And eventually we all know what happened there. Very, very few people use film anymore. Everything's gone digital. It's on your phone. So yeah, in that case, essentially tombstone for both of them. Same thing happens with business acquisition. So let's talk about that and how you can use those same lessons. When I first started that, I learned a process from my mentor back in the 90s. That process is still the same. And those steps of finding an industry, building a board, getting your professionals, financial institutions, if you need it, and then acquiring businesses. So that process. Or the steps, basically. If you look at the process, though, that's changed. Back when I started, and you're going to find this hard to believe, I got my first email address in 1995. I started this before 1995. So there was no email. There was no internet. What you had was what we referred to as shoe leather. You figured out from a Rolodex and your contacts who you would want to contact. Then you would get in touch with those people. Then you would get on a plane, train, or automobile and do it. We've evolved from shoe leather to what can you do today? You can use the internet. You can use LinkedIn. You can use personalized letters, which you probably could have used back then, but we just didn't do it. So the process and steps are the same, but the techniques have changed. And my marketing director and I, when I release a new boot camp, and when I say new, I've done several of the Acquisition Advantage boot camps. And every time we release a new version, we say to ourselves and we identify what has changed, what can we add to this, and if there's not enough, there's not a lot of sense in creating a new boot camp because the techniques are the same as what were in the last. But that's not the case. So we've evolved with techniques. We've used now AI. We've done personalized letters where we didn't do that before, on and on and on. We just use the same letter, basically. So my point on all of this is look at what happens to companies that don't learn. Look at what happens to companies that don't evolve and use. So there are tons of new tools now. AI is a whole new world. I just caution you, it's a tool. It's not an omnipotent power that you can listen to and it's always right, because it's not always right. But while the steps are the same in this business acquisition process as they were 30 plus years ago, the tools that you can use are very, very different. So I'd encourage you to remember that. I'd encourage you to take a look at this, and we could turn this image here into a different image. Instead of buzzards, maybe now they represent eagles flying over. Instead of the buggy itself, maybe it's a Tesla or an EV or something beyond that. And in terms of the digital content, which is now streaming, that basically hurt and put out of business in some cases the Blockbuster and Kodak, remember that's changed. So look at that image as well and realize that yes, you can evolve, you can change. The companies that don't do that go out of business. And if you want a lesson, just go look at the number of Fortune 500 companies and ask ChatGPT, if you will, how many of those companies in the Fortune 500 20 years, 50 years, 100 years ago, whatever it is, are still in business today. And that'll be a little eye-opening for you. So I hope that you recognize that. I hope you stay current with the times and the tools and techniques. And the Acquisition Advantage Bootcamp 2025 was created because we made changes to the previous versions and included things that would help you. So if you like this content, like and subscribe. If you have suggestions on what you'd like to see, send me an email, bruce@brucewhipple.com, and give me those thoughts, because these are intended to help move you to the goal line the quickest and to have you succeed at this. That's the reason I do these.